I'm John Burton. John Burton. I'm the chairman of the International E-Type Register, which is a part of the Jaguar Drivers Club Limited. This car here, rough as it may be, bit of chrome missing there, but don't worry about it. This is chassis number 2 fixed head coupe. I've owned it since about 1981-2. No intention of selling it, and it's a lovely old car. My daughters drive it, and so does my son-in-law drive it. It was first owned by a gentleman called Anthony Frederick Davenport, and his registration number, AFD 250, is on the car, as you may be able to see. I like the noise, don't you? It's great. No, Jaguars. Anthony Frederick Davenport raced an XK150 S 3.4 in 1959-60, and he wanted to race this new E-Type that had come out. But the Roadster was already launched, and the Roadster had already won its first race, and there were many others, drivers racing already, so he didn't want to be up against them. His XK150S was too slow in its 3.4 engine with D-type cylinder head, D-type cams. So he thought he'd buy one of these cars, and this is it, fixed head. Fixed head is because it's in the GT class, not in the Roadster class, so he'd be on his own, wouldn't he? So the minute it was available, September, he went and got the car from the factory in his XK. He asked the competitions department, although it wasn't really a competition department, it was a department of the factory, to kindly change the engine out of the E-Type into the XK, and out of the XK into the E-Type. So straight away he had his 3.4 engine, smaller than this engine, which was 3.8, remember? And this, but I imagine he kept the triple carbs. The E-Type engine, incidentally, is still in the XK150, which also used to carry the registration AFD 250, which this car carries, as you see. So I found the car in a hedge. I wasn't the first man to find the car, no. Many people saw it in the hedgeway next to the garage. The garage proprietor owned the car and sold petrol. And I imagine it was a pretty good magnet for selling petrol, because, I mean, I pulled up and said, can you put petrol in it? And the petrol pump attendant said yes. And I said, and the E-Type, and he said, oh, it's the boss's. And he must have told 10 people a day or 5 people a day for years about that. The gentleman I bought it from, Peter, he'd owned it for 10 years and only driven it for 1. It hadn't been in the hedge for the other 9, it had been in the garage, and he just couldn't bring himself to finding time to put sills on it, repair it, i.e., and get it on the road. So he just left it in the garage, and eventually one day there was a hole in the hedge. Cattle had got out, they put the cattle back through the hole in the hedge next to the garage. They were looking for something to block the hole up with. The E-Type was in the shed, in the garage in the way. They pushed it out and shoved it in the hedge. With the bonnet askew on the car, and that was it for the time being. Like all garage men, oh, I'll do mine later, I'm too busy fixing everybody else's, which is pretty much how I feel, but never mind. Not feel so much as, I'm not a garage man, but I do play with cars, yes. And I love them. I love cars, love the internal combustion engine and all the noise. And I love drinking, I love women as well, but that's another subject, all right? Try and stick to what we're talking to. Where were we? Shortly after purchase, and when it was nearly on the road, I thought I ought to write to the first man whose name was in the logbook, Anthony Frederick Davenport, on coat, leak, staffed. So I did, I wrote a letter saying I got the car, and there's a stamped address envelope, and I'm alive, and if you are, please reply. Well, I didn't hear anything for weeks and weeks, and just as I'd given up, well, decided it wasn't worth it, I got a letter back. The lady who ran the post office, the local post office of Oncoat, saw the envelope, my letter come through, or be returned as not at this address, knew that Mr. Davenport had moved to another address locally, readdressed the envelope and stuffed it back in the post, and that's how he got it. I went up there to see him. He had had a stroke, he was in a wheelchair, he was doing a lot of things with Olivetti computers. In the early 80s they were there. I think he was writing the software or something, I'm not really sure. He was loving it, he was absolutely thrilled to see his car. I pushed him out in his wheelchair next to it. We took photos, his delightful wife gave us something to eat, obviously fed us a cup of tea, that sort of thing, and myself and another friend with an E-Type, my first E-Type that was, this friend, my first E-Type, and this one, we chatted, and he produced photographs taken at places like Silverstone and Snetterton and Alton Park, which he gave me copies of. So I have copies. He wouldn't give me the original, so I don't mind. At least I had copies. Now, I had no idea the car had a racing history, and that's what it turned out. The bloke sold me this car. He had no idea it had a racing history. He probably wouldn't have sold it to me if he had. He's asked since if I buy it back because he sold his garage business and he's come into some money. But no, he'll buy it and he'll park in his garage and no one will see it like he did the first time round.